for me, or in Ghana, I think social cohesion is the strength of relationship within the community, within Ghana as a whole, given that we are a multi-ethnic, multi-religious, multi-political party, and multi-sexual orientation country. Social cohesion is how all these dynamics come together to create a solid society.
Since I'm from former Yugoslavia, exactly from Bosnia and Herzegovina, I would say from a personal perspective that social cohesion has a lot to do with druženje and poštivanje, which means to be friends and to value each other.
If we want to really conduct research in the field of social cohesion, which is a very complex, multifaceted phenomenon, we definitely have to engage actively with local researchers and university, especially in Africa, where our project at IDOS focuses. Otherwise, we risk really not to understand each other when we use certain terminology.
In Guinea, talking about social cohesion means talking about how to struggle to put end to the conflicts. Diverse conflicts is basically how people is struggling to access to resources, state resources, minor resources, agroforestry resources, and so on. We have an important value to contextualize social cohesion in Guinea due to the history of the country, because we have two paradigms that are going together. We have the peace-building paradigm bring by the international organization and support by the state, and we have the local conception or the local paradigm based on the socialities, and these socialities help to understand that the social cohesion is bring or is created through what we call the pleasantry or the joking between peoples, between communities, between families, and it is something a lot Europe or the Western conception can learn from Guinea by this kind of contextualization.
It is pursued as a way of nation building because we come from a history that divided us according to race, ethnicity, language, and also geographically.
Well, I would say there's no single concept that will capture social cohesion, but I think looking at our country document, the society, the idea of monitoring interaction, which means connectedness, inclusivity, and the idea of diplomacy, which relates to moving together and doing things, I think represent what the social cohesion really is about in Malawi.
When studying social cohesion, we need to pay attention to the context, because as social scientists, we develop and build concepts to develop frames that allow us to observe phenomena in society. So when defining, for instance, the three elements of social cohesion, cooperation, trust, and identity, we need to see whether there are additional phenomena or criteria in societies. And if we don't capture these phenomena, we're not able to observe and study social cohesion. So that's really a social science concept question.
For social cohesion in the Ivory Coast, they had elements of social cohesion embedded in local practices such as l'arbre à palabres, that is under the tree, way of resolving conflict and inter-ethnic alliances. For the modern context of social cohesion, which is pretty recent and taken up by the government, is an attempt by the government to eliminate all forms of exclusion and to foster trust in the people so that they can work collectively for a common good for the Ivorian society to engender development.
One of the main takeaways for me is that there is no sharp definition of social cohesion. And another one is that even within the borders of one country, there are different ideas what social cohesion is about.
There were a lot of interesting perspectives and contexts, but I think the main takeaway for me is that there can be an inverse relationship between family cohesion and social cohesion, especially when you are measuring it at country level. Another point I found really interesting is how price increases can have a direct impact on the level of trust. And this is directly supported by Afrobarometer's data, given that people felt more unfairly treated based on their economic circumstances than based on their religion and ethnic backgrounds.
We need to consider history and the ongoing debates in the different countries where we want to conduct research. If we don't take them seriously, we as researchers cannot really support policy makers for the implementation of policies aiming at improving social cohesion.
The main takeaway for me is the fact that we have so many ideas. We have vast, ideas from different country case studies, and this is enriching. I think that this helps us as researchers to understand that even though in certain contexts we have homogeneity, and in certain contexts we also have differences, and so as researchers, how do we distill the differences and nuance them in their respective contexts? And so I think that it is a great opportunity for us to continue this dialogue. I really like the opportunity to share and to learn from my colleagues.
My main takeaway of this workshop is that there's nothing such as an African exceptionalism when it comes to social cohesion. As in other countries, societies around the globe, in Africa, people unite around the concept of social cohesion in a sense that they cooperate with each other, and that's a very strong feature in many African societies. But what differs is the ways and the institutions that foster social cohesion. So for instance, there are a lot of associations where people help each other, and the way how they organize themselves, that differs, but that differs in all countries. So that's not an exception with regard to Africa.